Welcome to the Wealth Wisdom, where knowledge becomes power and power builds your future.
You probably think of taxes as a simple part of life, a percentage of your paycheck, a line on your receipt, something you pay because the law says you must. But what if I told you that taxes are far more than a civic duty? That they are not merely a tool for governments to fund roads, schools, or defense, but a hidden lever of global power, a silent force shaping economies, societies, and even the very balance of nations? What if I told you that every dollar you pay is part of a system centuries in the making, a system designed not only to fund governments, but to consolidate influence, control, wealth, and determine who rises and who falls in the global hierarchy? And the truth is, very few people notice this while it happens quietly every day, in ways that affect their lives more than they can imagine. To understand the hidden connection between taxes and global power, we have to go back further than most of us think, back to the origins of taxation itself. Taxation is as old as civilization. The first records come from ancient Egypt, over 4,000 years ago, where farmers were required to give a portion of their grain to the pharaoh. At first glance, this seems simple. The state needs food to feed its armies, its administrators, and itself. But the story beneath the surface is far more revealing. Taxes were never just about survival. They were about asserting authority. By demanding tribute, the pharaoh demonstrated control not just over resources, but over people's lives. Those who resisted or failed to pay faced severe consequences, reinforcing the power of the ruling class. Fast forward to ancient Rome, and you see the same principle amplified. Rome perfected a system of taxation that reached into every corner of the empire. Citizens and conquered peoples alike were required to pay tribute. Taxes were collected with military precision, and sophisticated bureaucracies were developed to ensure compliance. These taxes weren't just for building roads or aqueducts, they were a tool to maintain the empire's dominance. Rome understood that money could be weaponized. Controlling the flow of wealth meant controlling loyalty, labor, and even life itself. And with that lesson, the blueprint for taxation as a tool of global influence was set. As Europe entered the Middle Ages, taxation became entwined with the rise of kingdoms, monarchies, and eventually nation-states. Kings levied taxes not just to fund wars, but to reinforce the social hierarchy. Certain taxes were designed specifically to subjugate, others to incentivize, and some to extract resources from those who had little recourse. In many ways, taxes were the invisible chains of power, and the people often paid without realizing they were being shaped by the system. But the real turning point came with the birth of modern finance and the rise of centralized states. In the 17th and 18th centuries, European nations needed enormous sums of money to fund exploration, colonization, and increasingly expensive wars. Taxes alone weren't enough. Governments turned to borrowing, creating the first public debts. And soon, taxation became a critical part of a complex system that combined revenue generation with debt management. Control over taxation meant control over the financial lifeblood of a nation and, by extension, its ability to project power abroad. The story of taxes takes a darker twist when we examine the role of taxation in empire building. Take Britain, for example. The empire's reach was financed largely by taxes levied at home and abroad, including colonial territories. Every duty, every levy, and every tax on imports or goods played a strategic role. Taxes were not neutral. They were instruments to shape trade, favor certain classes, suppress dissent, and direct resources toward imperial goals. Resistance to these taxes, like the ones that sparked the American Revolution, was met with military force. What seems like a dispute over money is really a struggle over who holds power and who can dictate economic direction. This pattern repeats across history. France's high taxes in the 18th century led to the French Revolution. In more recent times, post-World War, taxation and fiscal policy were used to rebuild nations, stabilize economies, and even influence political alignments. Taxes, at their core, are not just about revenue, they are about steering society, controlling behavior, and shaping the global order. They are subtle but relentless levers of power. By the 20th century, taxation became intertwined with global financial institutions. The rise of central banks, international trade agreements, and institutions like the IMF and World Bank created a system where taxes were connected to global influence in ways most people never realize. When countries borrow money, the repayment often comes with conditions sometimes dictating economic policy, austerity measures, and even structural reforms. In effect, taxation and debt become two sides of the same coin. One extracts resources internally, the other channels them according to global strategic interests. In the United States, for example, the federal income tax, introduced in the early 20th century, was initially intended as a fair way to fund government programs. But over time, it became a sophisticated tool to shape behavior, redistribute resources, and finance wars. Tax incentives, loopholes, and deductions didn't just reward citizens, they directed the flow of capital, favored industries, and influenced which sectors of the economy thrived. Similarly, in other nations, tax codes are rarely neutral. They are carefully designed instruments to encourage certain types of economic activity, while discouraging others, often with a direct link to maintaining political stability and global competitiveness. And here's a critical, often overlooked fact. Taxes also shape inequality. How much you pay, what deductions you can access, and which industries benefit most from tax incentives determines who accumulates wealth and who remains dependent on the system. In essence, taxation helps decide the distribution of power within societies and between nations. The more you understand this, the more you see that taxes are not just numbers on a form, they are a mechanism for control, an engine of influence that stretches across borders. The rise of digital economies and multinational corporations has added another layer. Companies now navigate complex tax systems worldwide, sometimes paying minimal rates despite enormous profits. Governments respond with regulations, but often the richest actors are already positioned to exploit loopholes. This dynamic has global consequences. Countries compete for investment, through tax incentives, which can weaken social programs at home, while concentrating wealth in the hands of a few global actors. Tax policy is no longer local. It's a global chessboard where decisions in one country ripple across continents. And then there's the modern pattern that repeats itself with striking consistency. Every economic crisis, every major war, every structural reform, taxation is at the center. Consider the 2008 financial crisis. Governments around the world imposed emergency taxes, adjusted rates, and reallocated resources. Citizens bore the burden, while central banks and financial institutions were stabilized or rescued. Taxes functioned as the invisible mechanism to stabilize global power structures, ensuring that the existing hierarchy could endure even in the face of catastrophic disruption. Today, shocking data highlights the continuing pattern. In the United States, for instance, the top 1% of earners pay a disproportionately low rate when considering capital gains and loopholes. In developing nations, consumption taxes often take the largest slice from the poor. Globally, tax policy remains a decisive tool used to maintain financial stability, control capital flows, and influence geopolitical outcomes. And despite transparency efforts, much of the real power remains hidden behind complex codes, offshore structures, and multilateral agreements that most people never see. What does all this mean for the individual? For most citizens, taxes are simply unavoidable. But understanding their deeper role changes everything. Every dollar you pay is part of a broader system. A system designed not just to fund governments, but to shape society, influence markets, and consolidate power. Every deduction, every loophole, every exemption isn't accidental. It reflects strategic decisions made at the highest levels to guide behavior, protect interests, and maintain control. Here are 3 takeaways you need to consider. First, taxes are not neutral. They are a deliberate tool of influence. The rates you pay, the incentives available, and the burdens imposed are all part of a larger strategy to maintain stability and power. Understanding this gives you insight into why governments behave the way they do. Second, taxes and global power are inseparable. Local policy, national budgets, and international financial decisions are intertwined. Every time a government adjusts tax policy, it's not only addressing immediate needs, it's participating in a global system of influence. Whether that's stabilizing markets, encouraging investment, or managing inequality. Third, awareness is power. Recognizing how taxation functions within the larger system equips you to make informed decisions. Whether that is planning personal finances, engaging in civic discussions, or understanding international news, knowledge doesn't eliminate taxes, but it allows you to navigate the system consciously rather than passively. But here's the warning. This system is always evolving. New technologies, digital currencies, multinational enterprises, and complex financial instruments mean that taxation will continue to be a central lever of power, often more invisible and more pervasive than ever. Ignorance isn't bliss, it's vulnerability. If you don't understand how taxes function as part of global power, you risk being shaped by them without ever realizing it. So the question is not whether taxes influence power, they do. The real question is, Do you understand the rules of the game? Or are you simply paying and complying without seeing the larger system? At work, if this video has opened your eyes even a little, that's just the beginning. There's a hidden structure behind the numbers, the forms, and the payments system that has existed for centuries, quietly shaping the world. Understanding it isn't just enlightening, it's essential. If you want to see the world differently, understand your place in the global economy, and recognize how financial power is concentrated, make sure to subscribe, like, and stay tuned. The story of taxes isn't just about money, it's about influence, control, and the forces that shape every aspect of life on this planet. And once you see it, you'll never look at a paycheck or a tax form the same way again.